Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle and I have a new video and it's been a minute since I posted. I think it's been almost 2 months, but it's okay. We're doing it now. So I wanted to start off by going over some of the books that I read in February, but I'm going to be honest, I think I only read 2 books in that month, but I had said in a previous video that I wanted to read mostly Black authors. So I did read a number of books that I didn't talk about that were by Black authors over the last couple of months. So I'm gonna go over those. And I'm gonna start off with one book that I did read in February called Skin of the Sea. That is by Natasha Bowen. So it covers the life and journey of Simi when we meet her. She is a mermaid and she's part of the Mami Wata. And so she basically is a mermaid who was created by this goddess, and her goal as part of the Mami Wata is to go into the sea where there's ships and find any bodies that go overboard. And her goal is to save the soul of that person and send it on to their God and wish them safe passage on that journey. So she's doing this, and the more that you read the book, the more that you realize that she's based off of, I believe, somewhere around the west coast of the African continent, and it's set around the mid 1400s. So with all of that in mind, you realize that it's around the start of the transatlantic slave trade. So she's kind of coming to realize, like, hey, these are people who look like me, but they're humans, but they're being taken away by these foreigner, lighter skinned people. So at one point she saves this boy, and she's not supposed to. She's supposed to collect his soul, and it tells you in the jacket, so it's not a spoiler. So she ends up saving him, and that takes them on this journey, and she's trying to help him as best as she can, but it's tricky because, you know, she's a mermaid, and he's got his own agenda, and he's just trying to get back to his people and make sure that none of his family were taken when he was taken. So it's interesting. And I believe there's a second book that's going to be coming out. I'm not sure if it's a duology or a trilogy, but there is a second book for sure. The next book that I read was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. And this is also, I believe, a duology or a trilogy. There's a second book coming out called The Merciless Ones. So I really enjoyed this book. Basically, this is Decca, and she is, I believe, around 16 years old when they have this purity ceremony, and if your blood runs red, you're considered fully accepted into the community. And if it goes any other color, which in her case, if it runs gold, you're considered an outcast. And so some events lead up to this, and she, of course, like, her blood runs gold, but then there's so much that happens here, but I don't want to give anything away. Let's just kind of suffice it to say she ends up going on a journey. This mysterious woman comes and kind of like takes her in, and so she ends up kind of getting trained for an army of this king, and he's specifically recruiting people who have their blood run gold. And so in a way, he's kind of saving them from being like tortured or like seen as outcasts by their own community. And actually that's not the case with all communities. Some of them, they're like, oh, well, it's fine. There's ranges based on the different communities that the girls come from when she meets up with them. Some of them think it's completely normal. Some of them are like, it's different, but it's whatever. And then from like her, some people are like, oh, how dare you be among us when you have different blood? Like, you must be a monster or something. So while she's training in this facility with a bunch of girls who are just like her, she's got like her group of friends, but there's this threat of these other actual monsters, different beings who are on occasion coming in and like raiding and snatching kids, mostly girls, and they're just like, what do we do? Like, how do we attack this threat? And so the king is wanting to use this group of girls who are unique to fight off these monsters. And so things kind of unfold through there, where she kind of learns a little more about the people who are training her and why did they all get gathered in the first place. And it's really interesting. I really did enjoy it, and I'm hoping to read the next one soon. So yeah, that was The Gilded Ones. So another book that I read recently, actually I just finished it at the beginning of this month. This book is called Blended, and it is about this girl named Isabella. She is 11 years old and in the 6th grade. Her father is Black and her mother is white. And she's always known this. It's never been an issue. But as she gets, more into the school year, there are some things that kind of happen on occasion. And she's more aware of race and just kind of how that applies to her life specifically and to some of her friends. Like her 2 best friends, one is white, one is Black. And then there's this incident that happens at school. Somebody planted something in the locker of a Black girl, and it just sparked a lot of tension around the school. Everyone's like, well, what is that? Why would they do it? It basically was like a death threat, and they were just like, who would do this? And everyone's like freaking out. And so Isabella is kind of like trying to figure out what's going on, or why would anyone do something like that? And then like, should she be worried? Because she knows that she's also Black, but she's also white. So she's just, figuring things out. And she's like obsessed with music and is really good at playing. So she's practicing for recital throughout the book. But you also see her having different interactions with her mom and then her dad and her friends and her just peers. Like it's interesting. It's just kind of like almost a coming of age novel. And then there is a twist towards the end where I was like, oh, I didn't expect all of that to happen. It's really literally in the last 3 chapters, I was like, oh, what? But it kind of reflects real life. And so it was good. I would recommend it. It's definitely a middle grade book. So if you're not into that, you may not want to read it. But if you have younger kids in your life, or you're just interested in reading something outside of what you might normally read, this is Blended by Sharon Draper. So I have 2 other books that I did read recently that I would love to share. And the first one is called Root Magic, and that was by Eden Royce. I had never heard of it before, but another booktuber read it and loved it and can't wait to read the next book. So I read it, I think at the very end of December. I found a Kindle version of it and I just read it pretty quickly. And so from what I can remember, it is about this girl named Jezebel and her twin named Jay. And they had just turned around 11 years old. They're living off this little island in South Carolina. And I believe the year was 1963. So that's kind of the setting, and integration in the schools is just starting to happen. And so they're having to go to this different school than where they had been previously. And the book opens with having them just come from a funeral because their grandmother had just passed away. And there is the sheriff that kind of keeps coming back to their house and kind of harassing them. In the midst of all of this, their uncle tells them, it's time for you to learn root magic. And they're like, what? And they realize that it's this family practice that has been in their family for generations, sort of folk magic, where they're able to do potions and powders and just things here and there to kind of help people heal in certain ways. And so they're learning all of this, but they also have to be kind of careful about it because they don't want to cause the sheriff to come back for any other reasons, or they don't want to have any reasons for anyone to make them outcast or anything like this. But you learn it's something that they've been doing kind of throughout their community for years, and people kind of know kind of on the DL, like, hey, if you really need something for this or that, you can go to them and, you know, they'll help you out. They have a number of things that happen where they kind of have to kind of band together and kind of figure out what to do. But they do know that they'll have each other's back and they'll be there for each other. So it was cute. I didn't love it as much as this booktuber did, which is fine, to each her own, but it wasn't bad. I mean, I think it was well written. It just didn't like speak to me as much as like the Gilded ones, which I just loved. And that was more YA, but yeah. So that was book number 3. So Amari and the Night Brothers is another book that I read, and it is by B.B. Alston. I really enjoyed this book. It was so good. So basically it follows Amari, who is maybe 13, 14 years old. She's living in the projects with her mom and her brother until he goes away to school because he's done outstanding with his grades, and he's working for a bureau. I think he graduated high school and went straight into this bureau. And so she's like, wow, like that's awesome. Like I want to keep working really hard to get out of here and like, you know, make something of myself. And at one point, 2 people come from the bureau to tell her and her mother that he's missing. So her brother Quentin is missing along with his partner, who they were just like, we don't really know what happened. Like they were following a lead on this case and like they're gone. But we are doing everything we can to find them and hope to get them back as soon as possible. But, you know, try not to worry, even though it's a little worrisome. So Amari is just like, oh, wow, like I miss my brother. I want to find him, but I have no idea how. And then one day she goes in his room because she's just missing him, sits on his bed, and then she hears this weird ticking noise. So she goes where the sound is coming from, which is coming from his closet, and she sees this briefcase. So she opens it on the bed, and it's got this like coded message from her brother. And there's got this invitation on the bottom of the invite, or the bottom of the suitcase, and it's just like, hey, you're invited to this school. And so she is able to go and realizes like there's this whole other world of magic and like supernatural things that she had no idea was even close to being true. And so it's awesome. I just enjoyed the whole setup. Like, and so then she's like, okay, well now that I'm here, like I gotta really prove myself because all these other kids have known about magic their whole lives, and I really gotta like step up to show that I can be just as good as them. And this definitely gives me an in while I try to search for my brother, kind of figure out more, because I'm like closer to the source, more people know more about what he was doing, and I hope that I can find him. So I loved it. I did not realize that it was part of I believe it's a trilogy. I did not know that at the time. And the next one comes out in like May or something. And I was like, I don't want to have to wait. But I definitely enjoyed it. So those are the books that I read over the last couple of months. 2 of them were in February. But yeah, I enjoyed it. So if any of those like speak to you, hopefully you can check those out and read those yourselves. All right, enjoy. Bye.